Durban, South Africa, marked by its history with endangered laborers from India and its capital around the resource of sugar, and how that trails into capitalism and the evolution and growth of its hierarchical imposition on people, we then focalize into the symbol of sugar. Okmalumkoolkat dropped a project called uShugela, and I can't help but connect it with just the general historical relativity that it has to the fact that he's Durban's most important export, and the fact that his relation to the general South African culture and pop spectrum of our music and our aesthetics, even leaking into our fashion, is almost omnipotent in its influence. And yet Okmalumkoolkat is still one of the most unacknowledged artists in the game. I want to use this review to address two things. Why does Koolkat, after such an undeniable sense of influencing the game, still feels like he needs a little bit more sugar in his tea? And why, after the really compounded body of work that he has given us, do South Africans still not mention him in the name of greats? He hasn't won a lot of awards. Has he even won an award, Takis?
I don't think so.
Not that they matter, but you know, they're like tokens of industry acknowledgement. But I've always felt that this is the one thing Okmalumkoolkat never got, an acknowledgement from his peers, from the game in general, and as a result, he's this irony of being the master who hasn't been acknowledged by the game. uShugela eTiyeni, Headspace review. It's VJ, the brother from the ancient mother. It's gonna be an interesting one. I'm going to go into it. From the moment this two came out, Smizo Zwane was a breath of exhilarating fresh air. With his many monikers would each go with a certain kind of sonic spectrum. From his Dirty Paraffin incarnation, his Future Mfana Afrofuturism, his 100K Makassetes nostalgia with playing around Kwaito and reinventing everything from the dance moves, from his foray into introducing a larger South African youth culture to really urbanized American streetwear, to his being in the forefront of the incredible Boys and Bugs crew, who literally kind of determined the DNA of street culture as we know it today, you know, who the Bramfontein echo and ambience of aesthetics really should be credited towards, to being a guy who was really at the center of South Africa's reinvention of youth culture into this late period of AMA 2000s. AKA once said it best that that's the problem with your new school cats. Got your own stuff from Okmalumkoolkat. And he wasn't wrong. But it seems as if after this consistent streak, something about Okmalumkoolkat still isn't quite resonating beyond his niche space. What is this? I have a theory. I have a theory that Okmalumkoolkat can be paralleled with a figure like Kanye West. He is somebody who just can't help toying with each and every fresh idea that he sees around him. He's a creative schizophrenic, diving into places so broad that even his aesthetic looks very collagey. Like even with his whole Spova gang incarnation, if you look at the graphics, it's this pixelated IBM Microsoft influenced palette which goes into this kind of digital play with colors and computer generated models of texture, and all in this kind of tropical Durban landscape that is kind of juxtaposed around a concrete backdrop. He's weird. He's fucking everywhere at once, and at some point this used to be endearing because he was so eclectic at a time where the game was so drearily monotonous that he literally imposed, without even trying, his sense of creativity into everything everyone was doing at that time. Everybody wanted a piece of him. Casper swung his ponytail and brought him closer with ikusheshe. Ricky Rick affiliated with him and literally took that pivotal fashion aesthetic, giving it more sophistication, giving it a more kind of loyalty to the global fashion motif, whereas Malumkoolkat really is at heart a street fashion dude. Ricky managed to elevate, and I don't want to say elevate, managed to kind of navigate the whole fashion aesthetic around elegance, where Malumkoolkat really is about that rough and rugged, paper mache, take this and take that style of street instinct. And uShugela, oh my god, uShugela eTiyeni is yet a kind of another rendition of that. He has been somebody who in his evolution has birthed so many people inspired by him that I feel like it's put him in a position very similar to Kanye, where he feels the need to always innovate, but this innovation happens under the great imposing shadow of his very own influence. And a lot of the time he ends up playing into the game of what's trendy. His affiliation with Gqom was a very open kind of jumping into this. He sees himself as a Gqom revivalist, especially in the face of piano emerging so imposingly on Gqom. Malumkoolkat wants to do a lot of things at once, and for a change it just isn't coming across cohesively, because I feel in each and every one of those incarnations it was genuine, authentic to the moment, and really about exploring his creativity. Now I feel like he's a king that nobody acknowledged, who's still trying to prove himself to the rest of the popular world. Does that even matter? To him I feel it does, because he finds himself moving around the same tropes that he's been doing over and over again. And it doesn't sound old, it kind of just really sounds like an old man re-emphasizing why he is great to people who might not necessarily think it's that big of a deal when the greatness has elevated beyond you. This is one of those ironic moments where as a creative you have to understand that what you give will inevitably transcend beyond you. So at some point it won't matter if you started it, because it will be bigger than you. And I think this is what happened to Malumkoolkat. He woke up and before he knew it, it was beyond him. Street culture, the idea of blending this Euro-American flair with the indigenous style. He's fought for a lot of things. He's fought for the term skanda, because he had a variation called digital maskandi, which found him beefing with cats like Umashaz Bukre.
Yeah.
He has had numerous run-ins with many an MC that we admire. Even him and Ricky were not necessarily on good terms before he passed. And I feel what this is that it all boils down, never mind the noise of the ambience, it's real life. It all boils down to a kind of inevitable reality that he's now feeling like he has to chase. So with this current album, we see a man who's not really moving in his own natural stride, but we see somebody who's still trying to catch up with the unanimous results of his own legacy. And a legacy that has transcended and went beyond him. It now is not the legacy of Malumkoolkat, it's the legacy of South African culture in general. And I think this is an existential moment to have with himself, to really acknowledge his place and to kind of make peace with the fact that the game, the politics around his life, because I also feel one thing that made a major difference to how his legacy veered into non-existence were the things that happened to him. The rape charge in Australia, and numerous other moments where he found himself on the opposite side of cancel culture. And he's fought to kind of still become relevant in a place where you do one slightly politically incorrect thing and you're in the bin. And I think he's managed to be this resilient because he's genuinely one of the few people who's actually a creative. Check this guy out. The things he does come from a very informed place. He understands graphics, aesthetics, form, and design. And I think at the core, Koolkat is a creative. He's more than just a rapper or musician or a dancer. He's somebody who understands the style and the design and the form and the historical context of creativity in the South African context. This latest album is bloated. It's a whole lot of things that don't resonate cohesively because again, it feels like he's fighting for a crown which doesn't necessarily exist other than in his own head. He still comes through with those witty punchlines. He still comes through with the formulaic Okmalumkoolkat flows. And at this point, he's become like the uncle we all love having at the dinner, but who we can't help but be excited when he's left. Because his presence is exciting, but only in drips and drabs. Because he kind of can't help but remind us that he's still the man. And the thing is, those of us who know never doubted it. So the project to me is yet another kind of begging for acknowledgement from the game, and sonically doesn't manage to become a bridge for him to finally establish himself in the way that he wants to. Because again, I think that moving from something piano-esque back to gqom, back to trap, and then back to gqom again is a bit conflicted, especially seeing as if none of this has to do with the actual concept of the album. So there are tracks here and there that you could bump in a club. There are moments that are really shine through in this project. But again, with Okmalumkoolkat, it's more nostalgic and historical than it is innovative. He's an artist who's really settled in a place, and it's his place. Nobody can take it away from him. But it's a place that's becoming more and more normal, more and more typical, and as a result, this album really fails to go beyond the 6 mark for me. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. Mainly because for somebody who advocates creativity and novelty like Koolkat, to remain in the same place so long that it hurts your integrity is something that you've got to introspect and look at. So I feel like this is a lesson to all creatives. Number one, the legacy you build transcends you. It isn't yours. So if you want to be creative, do it for you, not for the things you gain from it. Number two, if you really are obsessed with being at the cutting edge, understand that it comes from acknowledging where you are organically, not trying to compete with where your industry. About uShugela eTiyeni is that you can't please everybody. And Okmalumkoolkat has fans from the gqom base. He obviously has fans from this very street hip-hop trap place. And he obviously has fans just from his being a personality and just being in the fucking face of people. And I think what he tries to do is that he tries to become this all-knowing, omniscient, omnipotent figure of creativity. And it comes across in this album. It is dizzyingly schizophrenic. It is in a lot of places, so much so that it doesn't even get a sense to kind of have a bearing of where he is as an individual. I don't even know much about his personal life and where he's at creatively and personally with this project, because it just feels like he's living in the caricature of who he's been and who he still wants to be. And a lot of this music is a raving of insisting himself on the game yet again. So my ultimate 6 out of 10 is based on the fact that it doesn't really highlight a lot of where he is musically, and it ends up dividing more than it does unifying. The gqom and the piano and the trap don't work cohesively to a point where the gqom songs won't be that good for gqom listeners, the trap songs won't be that, because when you end up trying to please everybody, you please no one. So I think an important lesson that I would suggest to him would be hone into what you want to do. And if you want to do all those things at once, it's possible. Sit down, reflect on it. One thing that's made geniuses like Kanye West so resiliently powerful is the fact that they can do that. They can kind of straddle the line and make one song into so many things, because they sit down with what the integral parts of each movement are and they try to merge it, and convergence is possible, especially with Creed. VJ, the brother from the ancient mother, 6 out of 10. Koolkat will forever be immortally relevant in the culture, but sometimes the heroes of culture aren't always the heroes of commerce. So it doesn't always gel in that way, yo. And I think he's just one of those people who will always acknowledge behind those who've managed to make money from it. I think that even makes him way more better. That's just my take.